Before you hear the cannons, before the drums begin, before Europe trembles beneath the footsteps of an army that should not have existed, I want you to step with me into silence. Not the silence of peace, but the silence before a storm is born. Because every empire, every tragedy, every legend begins in a place so small the world forgets to look. Come with me to a wind-beaten island stranded in the Mediterranean Sea, a place of salt, stone, and stubborn pride. Corsica, where an insignificant boy opened his eyes and the world unknowingly inhaled before a century of fire, before the medals and marble statues, before the golden wreath pressed upon his brow, before his name became thunder whispered across nations. He was just a child in a stone house, a child with a wooden sword, a child who watched the world with the cold, penetrating gaze of someone who didn't yet know he would reshape it. History remembers him as an emperor, a tyrant, a genius, a demon, a savior, a curse, a miracle. But history forgets the quiet moments. The boy alone in a dusty room studying maps no one asked him to read. The boy who felt the islanders' hatred for France burn into his bones. The boy who whispered to himself, "If they will not give me power, I will take it." That boy's name was Napoleon Bonaparte. And tonight I will take you into the world he built, broke, and rebuilt again. Not as cold history, but as the living fire he carried inside him. I've walked battlefields soaked in snow. I've seen places where entire armies vanished into the wind. But no place, no ruin, no memory strikes me with the sharpness of one name: Napoleon. A name that divides historians, a name that nations still argue over, a name spoken with reverence and with resentment. But if you strip away the myths, if you pull aside the gold, the propaganda, the fear, you find something far more dangerous than a conqueror. You find a man who believed destiny was not written, but forged. A man who believed the world was clay and he alone had the hands to shape it. And yet, before he became the architect of Europe, he was nothing but a second son of a minor Corsican noble on an island that France barely remembered it owned. A place so overlooked that even its rebellions were footnotes. But greatness rarely comes from the center. It rises from the edges, where people are born with something to prove. The year is 1769. Corsica has just been crushed, its rebellion extinguished beneath French boots, and in a small house in Ajaccio, on a humid August afternoon, a child is born as cannons are still cooling. A child destined to one day command cannons of his own. His mother, Letizia, barely more than a girl herself, is tough, proud, unbreakable. She rides horses while pregnant, dodging musket fire during the rebellion. From her, Napoleon inherits fire. His father, Carlo, educated, ambitious, always bowing to the powerful, teaches him diplomacy, charm, calculation, but also failure. For Carlo chases status like a shadow, and Napoleon learns how hollow it can be. He grows up surrounded by brothers and sisters, but he feels alone. Not lonely, alone. Different, watching everything, remembering everything. Corsica is a land of mountains, vendettas, honor, and poverty, and Napoleon absorbs it all. He plays not with toys, but with stories of warriors, rebels, heroes who fought impossible battles. He learns early that the world will not give him victory, so he sharpens himself into a weapon that can take it. His island hates France. France looks down on Corsica, and young Napoleon stands in the middle, belonging to neither. At school, he speaks French badly. Other boys mock his accent, his manners, his ambition. He fights them, and loses often, but keeps fighting anyway. Teachers describe him as serious, solitary, burning with ambition, possessed by unusual willpower. While others dream of comfort, he dreams of glory. Not riches, not titles, glory, the kind that rewrites your name in history. He reads constantly Plutarch, Tacitus, Polybius, lives of Caesar, Alexander, Hannibal. But note this, he does not simply admire them, he studies them, like a scientist studying a specimen. How did Caesar break the Gauls? What made Alexander unstoppable? Why did Hannibal fail? What could he have done differently? He is not trying to become them. He is trying to surpass them. Napoleon does not copy history. He interrogates it, improves it, prepares to challenge it. When he is 9 years old, his father sends him to France to study. Imagine that. A Corsican boy, barely able to speak French, thrown into a world of aristocratic children who laugh at his name, his heritage, his rough clothes. He eats alone, studies alone, plans alone. But isolation is not a prison for him. It is a forge. I want you to imagine walking with him down the long stone corridors of the military academy at Brienne. The air cold, the boys whispering, the teachers watching this strange, intense child who never quite smiles. He walks as if he hears drums no one else hears. He moves like a soldier before ever becoming one. Winter after winter, his hands numb, he stands outside drawing battle plans in the snow with a stick. He constructs miniature forts. He studies artillery angles. He memorizes maps. He breathes strategy the way other boys breathe air. He grows lean, sharp, unyielding. Every humiliation hardens him. Every mockery sharpens him. Every failure fuels him. By the time he graduates, he is no longer the isolated Corsican boy. He is something else, something new, something dangerous. A mind forged in loneliness, a will sharpened by rejection. Napoleon Bonaparte's story is not merely about ambition. It is about timing, calculation, and the cold recognition of chaos as a tool. By the time he steps out of Toulon, the revolution has already swallowed France whole. The monarchy is dead, aristocrats are fleeing, the guillotine spins tirelessly in Paris, its shadows stretching to every corner of the nation. The old order is gone, but the new one is not yet born. It is messy, it is violent, it is ripe for a mind like his. And Napoleon? He is ready. Imagine Paris in 1793. Streets littered with debris, marketplaces emptied, whispers of conspiracy on every corner. Citizens look to the Committee of Public Safety for guidance, but guidance is thin, often deadly. The city is a pressure cooker of fear and fury, and every decision carries a weight measured in heads. Napoleon observes it all, not as a child in Ajaccio, not as a cadet at Brienne, but as a man who sees systems, patterns, weaknesses, leverage. He understands something the revolutionaries forget. Power is not seized in the streets. It is captured in the minds of those who are afraid. In 1796, at 26 years old, Napoleon receives command of the Army of Italy. Pause and consider that. A 26-year-old commanding tens of thousands of soldiers in a nation torn apart by political upheaval. A man still young enough to be underestimated, yet brilliant enough to turn that underestimation into his weapon. Italy is fractured. The Austrians occupy the north. Venetian wealth is scattered, and local populations are wary of revolutionaries, French or otherwise. Every step is a minefield of logistics, morale, and political sensitivity. Every failure is fatal. Napoleon does what he always does. He calculates, observes, and adapts. He marches his army in ways no one expects, strikes at points the enemy thinks safe, and refuses to be predictable. His genius is not in bravery alone. It is in turning chaos into opportunity. Each victory is not merely a military success, it is a psychological blow. Soldiers of Austria and Piedmont begin to fear the name before they see the face. Towns surrender rather than fight. Entire armies crumble not from swords, but from the certainty of defeat instilled before a single musket is fired. Napoleon's victories bring fame, but he does not stop at fame. He understands propaganda long before the term exists. He sends dispatches to Paris in language designed to impress, inspire, and elevate. Napoleon now begins to reshape France itself. He stabilizes the economy with the Bank of France. He codifies laws in the Napoleonic Code, which replaces chaos with order, rights with clarity. He reforms the education system, centralizes the administration, and crushes insurrections, not through indiscriminate bloodshed, but through precision, timing, and psychological dominance. France is being rebuilt, brick by brick. But the bricks are not just structures, they are symbols of control. Napoleon understands. Empires rise not just from force, but from structure, perception, and law. In 1804, Napoleon crowns himself Emperor of the French. Pause and reflect on this. Traditionally, the Pope would place the crown on the monarch's head. Napoleon does something different. He lifts the crown himself, placing it upon his head. This is no mere spectacle. It is a statement. My authority comes not from God, not from tradition, not from others. It comes from me. I am the architect of my destiny. It is audacious. It is terrifying, and it signals a new era. Napoleon's campaigns across Europe follow, a mind honed from youth, shaped by battle, isolation, study, and observation, now commands entire nations. His army is a living machine, logistics calculated with precision, units moving in synchrony across hundreds of kilometers, morale maintained through charisma and fear, strategy executed with the cold elegance of mathematics. He wins battles with speed, flexibility, and psychological dominance. The enemy is often defeated before it can react, confused by maneuver, misled by deception, and ultimately outclassed by brilliance. Waterloo will later test this system.
Napoleon stands atop Europe. His victories are the stuff of legend. Austerlitz, Jena, Wagram. His army moves like a shadow across the continent. Kings, emperors, and parliaments bend before him. France is his instrument. History itself seems to obey. And yet, at the height of power, every empire contains the seeds of its own undoing. Picture Paris in 1810, wide boulevards gleaming, fountains reflecting sunlight, statues celebrating the glory of the nation and of Napoleon himself. He governs with an iron hand hidden in a velvet glove. Laws ensure order and obedience. Families swear loyalty to the empire. Cities are rebuilt to reflect power and permanence. Even love is harnessed. His marriage to Josephine and later to Marie-Louise is political theater, a tool to consolidate alliances and secure heirs. Every gesture is carefully calculated. Every smile, every decree, every battlefield move is part of the machine he has become. Napoleon understands human psychology better than any monarch before him. He can inspire devotion, instill terror, and reshape loyalty with a single command. Yet, no machine is perfect. In 1812, Napoleon turns east, Russia, vast, cold, merciless. He believes in speed, discipline, and strategy, but he underestimates the terrain, the climate, and the human will of a nation defending its homeland. Moscow burns before his eyes. The city he imagined would symbolize conquest instead becomes a graveyard of logistics and ambition. His Grande Armée, once invincible, succumbs to cold, hunger, and disease. Psychological control, even genius strategy, has limits. Nature cannot be decreed into submission, and armies, no matter how disciplined, are not machines. They are human, and humans break. Defeat in Russia ignites a chain reaction. The Sixth Coalition forms: Britain, Russia, Prussia, Austria, Sweden, Spain. Nations long subdued by Napoleon now unite in shared fear and determination. Every battle after Russia chips away at the illusion of invincibility. Leipzig, 1813, the Battle of Nations, shows that even brilliance cannot fully dominate numbers, terrain, and timing. Napoleon retreats, France trembles, loyalty fractures. Allies turn cautious, some betray. The machine is still there, but the gears are slipping. April 14, 1814, Napoleon abdicates. He is exiled to Elba, a tiny island in the Mediterranean. From sovereign of Europe to a solitary ruler of a speck of land, the contrast is staggering. Yet even here, he observes, calculates, and plans. The machine of ambition never stops. He rebuilds his court, his administration, and his army. He learns the lessons of the past. Power lost can be regained with timing, charisma, and audacity. March 15, 1815, Napoleon escapes Elba. He lands in France. The army sent to stop him, they join him. The people who once revered him, they cheer him. The government that replaced him, it crumbles. Napoleon is not just back, he is a symbol, a living force of inevitability. In weeks, he is emperor again. This is the apex of the 100 Days. A man against Europe, relying not just on armies, but on the psychology of loyalty, fear, and spectacle. June 18, 1815, Waterloo. Napoleon faces Wellington and Blucher. Here, the limits of his genius are exposed. Terrain restricts maneuver. Weather slows movement. Coordination fails. The army, exhausted and stretched, is human, not machine. Napoleon himself fights with brilliance, but victory slips through fingers that once grasped empires with ease. The French army is defeated. Europe is united against him. Even the greatest machine has a weak link: the unpredictability of chance, human error, and time. Napoleon is exiled again, this time to St. Helena, a remote island in the South Atlantic. Here, removed from power, stripped of armies and allies, he confronts his mortality and legacy. He writes, reflects, debates, and teaches. He becomes a historian of his own machine, detailing victories, errors, and strategies for posterity. Even in isolation, the mind that conquered Europe remains sharp, though its power over the world is gone. Death comes in 2021. Napoleon's life is not just a story of battles. It is a blueprint for influence and control. Observation. Study every detail, every weakness, every emotion. Timing. Strike when the world is unstable. Psychological mastery. Inspire loyalty, fear, and awe. Adaptation. Learn, innovate, and exploit every situation. He proved that genius alone can reshape nations, that ambition, combined with meticulous planning, charisma, and audacity, can bend history itself. But he also proved the limits of power. Machines, no matter how well engineered, are vulnerable to chance, nature, and collective action. Napoleon dies in exile, a man whose mind once dominated Europe. Yet his system, his strategies and laws survive. Generations study him. Armies replicate his tactics. Leaders emulate his psychological control. The world remembers the Corsican artilleryman not just for conquest, but for showing the mechanics of ambition, the architecture of power, and the fine line between genius and hubris. History never forgets a man who understood systems, controlled perception, and dared to command fate.
When Napoleon's heart stopped beating on the lonely island of St. Helena in 1821, the world exhaled. Kings and emperors slept easier. Parliaments celebrated. Old monarchies shook off their fear like a nightmare fading at dawn. But history misunderstood something essential. Empires die. Myths do not. The man was gone. The shadow remained, and in that shadow, the world transformed. They brought his body back to France in 1840. 19 years after death, he returned in a black coffin, carried by a golden barge along the Seine. Crowds pressed against each other. Old veterans cried openly. Children were lifted onto shoulders to see the legend come home. France didn't bury a man. It crowned a myth. Napoleon became what he always secretly wanted to be, an idea, indestructible, eternal, unkillable. His ghost entered courtrooms, schools, borders, and nations. His Napoleonic code, written to stabilize a chaotic France, spread far beyond it. Belgium, Italy, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Spain, entire regions of the Americas, even modern legal systems today echo his reforms. He may have lost at Waterloo, but in the battle for how society functions, Napoleon won forever. Every war fought after him carries his fingerprints. He created systems, not just victories. Core structure, used by every modern army. Mass conscription, nations mobilizing entire populations. Rapid maneuver warfare, speed over size. Artillery as the backbone of battle, something he mastered at 16. Generals from Rommel to Patton to Zhukov studied him like scripture. Napoleon died. His tactics didn't. After his death, something strange happened in Europe. People began to dream of him, paint him, write about him, invoke him in revolutions. They imagined him returning, riding from Minsk, reclaiming Europe in a blaze of glory. He became a messianic figure, a symbol of order, power, genius, destiny, the self-made hero who rose from nothing. There were even conspiracies. Some claimed he wasn't dead. Some believed he escaped St. Helena. Some swore they saw him in America. That wasn't madness. That was influence. In 1852, Napoleon's own nephew rose from the ashes, Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, a man who understood the power of myth better than anyone alive. He used his uncle's image like a weapon. He said, "Vote for me, and I will bring back the glory of the empire." And France listened. France obeyed. France crowned him emperor. Napoleon I had died once. The idea of Napoleon never died at all. The Second French Empire was built not by a living emperor, but by the memory of one. Napoleon influenced the creation of modern Italy, the unification of Germany, the rise of nationalism, the idea of meritocracy, revolutionary governments. Even distant nations shaped their armies and bureaucracies based on French Napoleonic structures. Japan's Meiji reformers studied him. Latin American independence leaders admired him. Even the Ottoman Empire reformed their military in his shadow. How many dead commanders command armies a century later? Only one. What survives of Napoleon is not just the emperor, it's the man. In his letters from St. Helena, we see him vulnerable, doubting himself, questioning fate, reflecting on love, admitting fear, missing Josephine. The myth is a giant, the man is human, and that is precisely why he lives on. He is both the conqueror and the lonely exile, both the emperor and the abandoned husband, both the architect of nations and the prisoner of a rock in the ocean. Humanity relates to him. History magnifies him. Myth completes him. 200 years later, we still argue about him. Was he a hero, a tyrant, a visionary, a monster, a genius? The truth is simple. He was all of them. Napoleon teaches us that power is fragile. Genius is dangerous. Ambition can build nations or burn them. Fate is never guaranteed. Even the greatest fall. And yet, he also teaches us that ideas can outlive mortality. His empire collapsed, his armies faded, his enemies celebrated. But today, people study him. Films portray him. Books analyze him. Schools teach him. Nations still follow his legal codes. Napoleon died on an island. Napoleon lives in civilization. The camera fades out on a deserted coastline of St. Helena. Waves crash. Wind moves over empty rocks. The tomb lies silent. Then a voice whispers, "Glory is fleeting, but obscurity is forever." Napoleon said that, and he proved himself right. The man disappeared. The myth conquered time.
The hidden fears, obsessions, rituals, and mental engines that powered Napoleon Bonaparte. This chapter moves away from battles, away from armies, away from the roar of cannons and the thunder of cavalry. This is the Napoleon you never see in history books, the man behind the myth, the mind behind the empire. Welcome to the interior fortress. Before the emperor, there was a boy, a Corsican child growing up under the sound of musket fire, rebellions, and poverty. He wasn't the strongest, he wasn't the tallest, he wasn't the most charming. He was ignored, underestimated, dismissed. His teachers described him as silent, alone, observing everything. This loneliness forged the psychological pattern that followed him forever. He needed to prove himself no matter the cost. To France, to Europe, to history, to himself. Every victory Napoleon ever fought was against the ghost of a powerless child. People talk about Napoleon's tactics. They miss the deeper truth. Napoleon's true genius was interpretation. He could walk into a room and instantly read who feared him, who envied him, who intended betrayal, who could be manipulated, who could be broken. He observed posture, breath, silence, hesitation. He once said, "I know a man by how he listens." This ability created loyalty so intense that men would die for him. But it also created paranoia, because once you can read everyone, you never stop watching. Napoleon understood human psychology at a predatory level. He used silence to intimidate, sudden generosity to create debt, praise to trap loyalty, public humiliation to destroy resistance, myth-making to appear larger than life. He wasn't just a general, he was a psychological architect. He knew that humans craved purpose,
validation, a role in something greater. Napoleon offered all three, and that made him dangerous. Napoleon feared one thing above all else: irrelevance. Failure didn't scare him. Death didn't scare him. But being forgotten? That terrified him. This fear explains his obsession with rewriting laws, his hunger for expansion, his endless need for titles, coronations, symbols, his compulsion to create a dynasty, his desperation in exile to write his own history. He once confessed, "I fight for glory. A man without glory is a man dead to the world." He wasn't fighting nations. He was fighting time. Napoleon did everything fast: decisions, marches, negotiations, campaigns. Why? Speed gave him psychological dominance. If he moved faster than his enemies could think, he controlled their emotions, their reactions, their panic. He turned wars into psychological duels, and he always struck first. But this speed came from an internal engine that never rested. Napoleon rarely slept more than 3 to 4 hours a night. Insomnia fueled him. Restlessness haunted him. His mind never stopped.
Napoleon had immense emotional capacity he rarely showed. With Josephine, he was not an emperor. He was desperate, jealous, possessive, tender, and vulnerable. He wrote letters filled with need and longing, lines like, "Without you, the world is empty." But love conflicted with ambition. He needed an heir. He needed alliances. He needed to be bigger than personal emotion. So he divorced the woman he truly loved to marry a symbol. This decision haunted him until death. Even at St. Helena, he whispered Josephine's name. Great minds often self-destruct, not because of weakness, but because of excess. Napoleon's strengths became flaws. His confidence turned into arrogance. His speed turned into haste. His faith in destiny turned into blindness. His emotional control turned into isolation. His psychological insight turned into paranoia. He built an empire with his mind, but he could not escape the traps inside it. In exile, stripped of power, he confronted the one thing he had always outrun: silence. No armies to command, no ministers to intimidate, no wars to plan, just memory. He replayed every decision, every betrayal, every love, every mistake. He became his own historian, his own judge, his own mythmaker. His writings reveal a man who finally saw the truth. He was not just the architect of his empire, he was the architect of his downfall. Psychologists today would classify Napoleon as a visionary strategist, a hyper-observant introvert, a charismatic manipulator, a restless achiever, a destiny-driven idealist, a man addicted to power, a genius with self-destructive tendencies. In modern terms, he had high-functioning narcissism, obsessive ambition, insatiable competitiveness, episodic depression, extreme attachment issues, a superiority complex buried beneath it. He was contradiction incarnate, a man torn between love and ambition, logic and destiny, humanity and empire, brilliance and blindness. And it was this paradox that made him unforgettable. Napoleon did not conquer Europe with armies. He conquered it with psychology, with perception, with vision. His greatest battlefield was not Austerlitz or Jena or Waterloo. It was inside himself. And even in defeat, even in exile, even in death, the mind of Napoleon continues to rule history, not because it was perfect, but because it was human, a storm of brilliance and flaw, a clash of shadow and light, a king built from contradictions. What Napoleon didn't want the world to know, and what the world tried desperately to erase: when an empire falls, it does not fall quietly. Papers burn, Witnesses vanish. Accounts are rewritten. Truth is edited by the victorious. But some secrets refuse to die. These are the stories whispered behind palace doors, hidden in censored archives, buried in footnotes, and kept alive by rumor, fear, and the stubborn refusal of truth to remain silent. Welcome to the forbidden zone of Napoleon's empire. There exists a set of letters Napoleon wrote to Josephine that historians still argue about because they are too intimate, too emotional, too revealing. One letter, never fully published, was said to contain lines that exposed his crippling jealousy, his insecurity, his fear of losing control, his total dependence on her affection. Why did this matter? Because the emperor who conquered Europe could not afford to be seen as emotionally vulnerable. His political rivals hunted these letters like treasure. His ministers panicked. Some documents were burned, others hidden. One line survived in recollection. "Without you, I am not Napoleon." A line that showed the world the emperor was human, and therefore breakable. In 1800, a bomb nearly killed Napoleon in Paris. Everyone knows that. What they don't know is that the real assassin was never caught. The official story is that a group of royalists were executed. The archives say otherwise. Witness accounts suggest a shadowy figure placed the barrel bomb, walked calmly through the crowd, disappeared down an alley, and was never identified again. Reports that survived suggest the assassin worked for a foreign intelligence force, possibly with knowledge from inside Napoleon's government, possibly with connections deep within Parisian high society. Napoleon knew someone close had betrayed him, but he kept the truth silent because internal enemies are more frightening than external ones. Better to blame royalists that admit he had snakes in his own court. Napoleon's marriage to Josephine produced no heir, but rumors persisted ferociously that Josephine had secretly borne a child before Napoleon, or Napoleon fathered a child outside marriage, or that Josephine's daughter Hortense had royal blood not recorded. Napoleon's obsession with dynasty was desperate. He divorced Josephine to secure a bloodline with Marie-Louise. But in private, he admitted something dark. "My destiny ends if I produce no son." The scandal threatened the legitimacy of the empire. Whispers spread, pamphlets circulated, Republicans and monarchists alike mocked him. So Napoleon did what emperors do. He silenced critics, shut down newspapers, seized printing presses, and buried rumors in censorship. But even today, genealogists chase the truth. Some European families claim descent from Napoleon, and no one can prove them wrong. Few know that Napoleon once negotiated a secret alliance with Russia. In 1807, after Tilsit, he and Tsar Alexander I met on a raft in the middle of a river, away from ears and spies. There, Napoleon proposed a joint invasion of the Ottoman Empire, the division of Eastern Europe, a new map of the world drawn by only two hands. Alexander agreed, but Russia slowly realized something chilling. Napoleon didn't want Russia as a partner. He wanted Russia as a pawn. The Tsar withdrew, quietly. Delays, excuses, diplomatic fog. When Napoleon discovered the betrayal, he exploded. He believed Russia had humiliated him. He felt mocked, ignored, diminished. His wounded pride helped trigger the Russian invasion of 1812, a war born not just of strategy, but of a broken secret alliance, bruised ego, and personal vengeance.
Napoleon's health was always a quiet battlefield. In private, he suffered from severe stomach pain, chronic insomnia, anxiety episodes.
possible ulcers or cancer, hallucinations during fever. At times during campaigns, he wrote, "My body betrays me." But this was forbidden knowledge. If Europe had known the emperor was ill, even slightly weakened, his enemies would have united sooner. His doctors lied in official reports. His staff hid symptoms. His secretaries destroyed medical notes. On St. Helena, British doctors claimed he died of stomach cancer. French loyalists insisted he was poisoned. Both may be wrong. Recent theories suggest arsenic traces, common in wallpaper and medicines of the era, heavy metals in treatments, chronic stress, genetic predisposition. But one thing is certain: Napoleon's greatest physical enemy was inside him all along. On his deathbed, Napoleon whispered words to his companions. Official versions say he said, "France, Army, Josephine." But multiple witnesses gave different stories. Some say he confessed regret. Some say he cursed his enemies. Some say he predicted future wars. One claimed he admitted a dark secret about his rise to power. Another said he spoke of a shadow that followed him all his life. British guards recorded statements that were later sealed. Why? What did he say that was too dangerous? Some historians believe he revealed a conspiracy behind his rise, a betrayal within his marshals, or a hidden child he wanted acknowledged. We may never know. St. Helena keeps its secrets well. After his fall, French officials found a set of documents in Napoleon's private cabinet. A map, but not a normal map. It showed Europe reorganized, new kingdoms, puppet governments, continental systems, global colonies, even future French influence in the Middle East. This was Napoleon's 20-year plan, his vision if he had won. This was the world he wanted, a united Europe under French guidance, a Middle East controlled through alliances, Africa partitioned into protectorates, India freed from British rule, a global empire based on laws, not monarchies. When the coalition powers saw this map, they were horrified, and they ordered it destroyed. But copies may still exist, locked in archives in Paris, London, or Vienna. History paints Napoleon as a solitary genius, but he had one advisor, name lost to time, who warned him about Spain, Russia, diplomacy with Austria, his marriage decisions, his public image, the dangers of rapid expansion. Several letters survive from this anonymous figure, always signed the same way, a friend. Napoleon sometimes obeyed this friend, sometimes ignored him. But after 1809, the letters stop abruptly. Did the advisor die, or was he silenced, or did he become disillusioned? Napoleon later wrote in exile, "I had one man who understood me. I lost him, and I lost the world." Every empire hides truths. Every leader buries mistakes. Every myth rests on shadows. Napoleon's secrets survive because the world is still trying to understand him, the man who conquered nations while battling invisible enemies inside himself, the emperor who controlled Europe while losing control over love, health, and destiny, the icon whose victories are written in textbooks, but whose secrets are written in ash, whispers, and forgotten ink. Some truths died with him. Some were buried by others, and some remain hidden, waiting for the right historian to uncover them. Napoleon conquered continents, but his secrets, they conquered time.
Napoleon's health was always a quiet battlefield. In private, he suffered from severe stomach pain, chronic insomnia, anxiety episodes, possible ulcers or cancer, hallucinations during fever. At times during campaigns he wrote, "My body betrays me." But this was forbidden knowledge. If Europe had known the emperor was ill, even slightly weakened, his enemies would have united sooner. His doctors lied in official reports. His staff hid symptoms. His secretaries destroyed medical notes. On St. Helena, British doctors claimed he died of stomach cancer. French loyalists insisted he was poisoned. Both may be wrong. Recent theories suggest arsenic traces, common in wallpaper and medicines of the era, heavy metals in treatments, chronic stress, genetic predisposition. But one thing is certain: Napoleon's greatest physical enemy was inside him all along. On his deathbed, Napoleon whispered words to his companions. Official versions say he said, "France, Army, Josephine." But multiple witnesses gave different stories. Some say he confessed regret. Some say he cursed his enemies. Some say he predicted future wars. One claimed he admitted a dark secret about his rise to power. Another said he spoke of a shadow that followed him all his life. British guards recorded statements that were later sealed. Why? What did he say that was too dangerous? Some historians believe he revealed a conspiracy behind his rise, a betrayal within his marshals, or a hidden child he wanted acknowledged. We may never know. St. Helena keeps its secrets well. After his fall, French officials found a set of documents in Napoleon's private cabinet, a map, but not a normal map. It showed Europe reorganized, new kingdoms, puppet governments, continental systems, global colonies, even future French influence in the Middle East. This was Napoleon's 20-year plan, his vision if he had won. This was the world he wanted: a united Europe under French guidance, a Middle East controlled through alliances, Africa partitioned into protectorates, India freed from British rule, a global empire based on laws, not monarchies. When the coalition powers saw this map, they were horrified, and they ordered it destroyed. But copies may still exist, locked in archives in Paris, London, or Vienna. History paints Napoleon as a solitary genius, but he had one advisor, name lost to time, who warned him about Spain, Russia, diplomacy with Austria, his marriage decisions, his public image, the dangers of rapid expansion. Several letters survive from this anonymous figure, always signed the same way: a friend. Napoleon sometimes obeyed this friend, sometimes ignored him. But after 1809, the letters stop abruptly. Did the advisor die? Or was he silenced? Or did he become disillusioned? Napoleon later wrote in exile, "I had one man who understood me. I lost him, and I lost the world." Every empire hides truths. Every leader buries mistakes. Every myth rests on shadows. Napoleon's secrets survive because the world is still trying to understand him, the man who conquered nations while battling invisible enemies inside himself, the emperor who controlled Europe while losing control over love, health, and destiny, the icon whose victories are written in textbooks, but whose secrets are written in ash, whispers, and forgotten ink. Some truths died with him. Some were buried by others, and some remained hidden, waiting for the right historian to uncover them. Napoleon conquered continents, but his secrets, they conquered time.